All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. We're going to go through your questions today in our Q&A show, and then we'll close out with a little French Open men's preview. But how's it going, Drew? How are you, mate?
Ooh, not bad. Ready for French Open to really get here, and ready for the Celtics to hopefully do their jobs and help rescue a floundering fish, which is the way that I feel betting sports right now.
Okay, well, speaking of those plucky little Celtics and speaking of that floundering little fish, first question from our friend Mason Phillip, per your recent podcast. If the Celtics don't win, which freeway underpasses are the nicest? The 405, the 5, the 15, in all seriousness. I've followed and loved your content for a lot of years now. The cold streak will end shortly, I am sure.
Well, I like to take these Q&As very seriously, so I'm going to give you a serious answer. None of those underpasses are nice. They have, there's nowhere nice to live under a bridge here in California these days. But thankfully, they are letting people live on the beach, so I can just probably stroll down and find a nice place in the sand and pop a tent, and I will be just fine. But in seriousness, though, I do have a pretty significant stake that I've added to all throughout the regular season on Celtics to win the East. Looking at this series price now, it was tough not to add more Celtics in this series in some way, be it a series prop like handicap -1.5 games, -2.5 games, and or just betting the Celtics game by game. I've elected to do the latter, so I need the Celtics to not just win, but to do it in style against this Pacers team. And the handicap is pretty straightforward. I can't come up with numbers that say that this Pacers team is any good. And I know that they just beat the Knicks in the Garden in Game 7 with the most phenomenal offensive effort we've ever seen as humans watching Game 7s of the NBA playoffs. But I still can't get there that this team is going to be able to go toe-to-toe with a super team on paper like the Celtics. And I think in general, this is the perfect opportunity for the Celtics to get a little bit of reps for Porzingis to come back, try out some things with their rotation towards the end of this series, and then be primed and rested in the more well-rested team for the finals. So it's Celtics or bust now for me in this 2024 NBA playoffs.
Okay. Well, there are worse teams to ride with than the team that's like -165 to win the title right now and -1100 to win the East. But you never know with the Celtics. I too would like them to just take care of business. Don't want any funny business. Don't want it to be 2-1 going into Game 4 or that game going down to the wire. Just end it. Just win the first 2 at home. And then from there, I think the series should be a wrap, but they got to take care of business at home. And we'll talk about that as that series progresses. Just a last little note on the freeway underpasses and the cold streak. My biggest advice for, weathering losses or dealing with cold streaks is the best way to overcome that is to just have a portfolio that is as diversified as possible, where you just have as less of an attachment to individual results as possible. And look, I still get very annoyed if a bet goes down, or I still get happy if a bet loses, but I have enough skin in different parts of the game that it doesn't really register that as much anymore. Like in Serie A a couple of days ago, I had a -10,000 shot with 15 minutes left go against me. And then a week before that, I had a 150-1 shot in Ligue 1 go in my favor. Like it just swings and roundabouts. The Hurricanes blowing Game 6 of the Rangers really hurt, but then the Panthers pulling out Game 6 and the Stars winning in overtime and Edmonton getting out of Game 7, they were all good. Like it's just, and then there's all this stuff that's happening in the NBA as well. So if you're betting into a lot of sports with an edge, then it gets easier to deal with the cold streaks, I think.
Well, I'm in a weird spot because I look at my results and I'm like, I guess I'm a hockey bettor now. I mean, that's the only thing that's going in my favor, really, the entire 2024 since the Australian Open. It's been that long. So, I need to run a good form here. And, it starts presumably with the Eastern Conference Finals.
Okay, let's go Boston. Speaking of Boston, at Kings Court 99, can Mini beat Boston or not enough offense, if that is the matchup? And I grow more bullish that it's going to be the Dallas Mavericks, so the market keeps going the other way. So seemingly I am on an island there. What do you think about a potential Minnesota-Boston matchup?
Yeah, pretty confused by the market activity in Minnesota Dallas series, if we're being honest. I thought the numbers were fair, and to see many people line up and lay the price with them is surprising. I don't think the Timberwolves are meaningfully better than the Nuggets. I mean, excuse me, meaningfully better than than the Mavericks, and I definitely don't think that they go toe to toe with the Celtics, particularly the offense being the biggest issue. Celtics are really, really, really well rostered defensively. They have, kind of redundancy at the point of attack with Drew Holiday and Derek White. They have elite wing stoppers and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And assuming we have one big who will be available, if not two, then you have good rim protection on top of everything. So I don't really see a clear and obvious mismatch outside of a little bit of problem with size and Karl Anthony Towns against, whoever you are, electing to put on Towns. But, if you can dare Rudy Gobert to beat you offensively in that series, then I think I'm feeling pretty good with the Celtics being able to outscore the Eiffel Tower there. So to me, it does come down to how does Minnesota's offense fare against the Boston Celtics defense, because I think that's a mismatch. And then on the other side of the coin, I think the Celtics have enough ways to attack you offensively that even the great Minnesota Timberwolves defense would be a little bit of a trouble there. My series price we talked about yesterday is somewhere between 330 and 380, depending on the health and availability of Porzingis. So I'd be pretty bullish on the Celtics' chances if it's Boston Mini.
Yep, no, that all makes sense to me. One thing that I just wanted to get out there, given this is the last time we'll be able to talk about Dallas, Minnesota before game one tips off. I think there is this idea that has permeated that the Wolves are now a juggernaut, and people are talking about Denver, Minnesota game 7 as though that was like, that's for the title. Meanwhile, there's a team on the eastern side that's minus 165 to win the title. But anyway, to me, I think Dallas is more likely to be a sleeping juggernaut. And the reason is that, one, if you have just a surprise juggernaut team out of nowhere, it would make more sense. It would be a team like Dallas that reinvented itself at the trade deadline. From March 7 to April 10, an 18-game stretch that the Mavericks played before the last 2 games of the season just didn't matter for them because they had the 5 seed clinched. And in this stretch, it wasn't the hardest schedule on earth, but still, they played Golden State 3 times, Miami twice, Sacramento twice, Denver at Oklahoma City, twice against the Houston team that was playing well, at Chicago. Like, it's not total layups. And in that stretch, they were a plus 12 net rating. They went 16-2. And most importantly to me, they had a 106 defensive rating, which would be clearly the best in the NBA. And they've carried that into the playoffs through 12 games in the playoffs. Again, they're 8-4. They have a D rating of 110, and they've gone up against, an Oklahoma City team that was a top 5 offense that was fully healthy. And yes, they went up against the Clippers without Kawhi, but all throughout the season, if you had Harden and George on the floor, it was like a 124 offensive rating. Like, it was still a good offensive team, and Dallas just put the clamps on them. And I think that if Luka's knee is right, I think Dallas are going to win this series. But I just kind of reject the idea that Minnesota are the juggernaut candidate, clearly over Dallas, which is what the market is saying at the moment. And with how Luka's knee looked in games 5 and 6 in this extended break, I'm pretty confident that he is going to be right. Those are my sentiments. So congrats to the Wolves on their 4-1 win over Dallas.
A very prominent mush is lined up on the Timberwolves, by the way. So I'll tell you about that off the air, but more impressively prominent than myself at this moment. But no, I think your points about Dallas are totally fair. I was a little bit hesitant to give them the full upgrade from that small sample post-trade deadline where they were the best team on earth because of the injury to Luka, but he looks fine. So if he's fine, then it is completely reasonable to expect that that's the team you're going to get. And, the defense all throughout the playoffs for them has been just outstanding. Save the game 1 against the Thunder where, you had a massive rest disadvantage. You want to put that one aside, fine. But otherwise, they've been incredible.
Yep. And just lastly on this question, in terms of the hypothetical matchup, I mean, Minnesota could beat Boston, but to your point, they're going to be significant or relatively significant underdogs. I think if they get through the Dallas series, just with how the market loves Minnesota, I would think that they might be, and it depends on Porzingis' availability and everything, but I think we said yesterday, like I thought the market would open them in like the plus 175 type of range. Maybe it's a little bit longer than that. And I think that Boston would get bet on the other side of that. But I think with Minnesota is, I think, and look, I could be wrong, and maybe the talent level is just so high on this team and is surfacing now, but they've taken in the playoffs, they've been able to take 38% of their shots at the rim. In the regular season, that was 33%. And I think that is a lot with these two specific matchups they've had where no one on the perimeter could stay in front of Anthony Edwards on either Phoenix or Denver. And then there was no athletic rim protection behind him. Like Nurkic is a fine defensive player, not against Anthony Edwards in the air. Jokic could do nothing at the rim against Edwards. Edwards just is too explosive, too athletic. So I think that going up against Dallas, who have been, close to effectively the best defense in the NBA, along with Minnesota of late, I think it's going to be a different matchup. Minnesota also, like, they couldn't score against Denver. Their offensive, they had a 111 offensive rating in the Denver series. And so I think they would also struggle against Boston if it is in the finals, just with Boston's defense and their athleticism too, particularly on the perimeter where they could throw so many different guys at Ant. And I just like, we're 11 games ago, the Wolves with home court were clear underdogs in a series to Phoenix, who were a 6th seed. And everyone thought Phoenix was going to win that series. Well, at least I think the majority of people did. And yeah, we're not that far removed from everyone thinking that, like, the Wolves, they just make dumb decisions at end of games. They have a certain amount of just kind of clown equity in how they close out games. And look, I think you can kind of do away with the clown equity, but still, I don't think this is some amazing offense. I think the defense is amazing. But anyway, we'll see. We'll get a chance. They'll have to take down, unless it's the Pacers, which God forbid, but they're probably going to have to take down what I would say are probably the second and third best defenses in the league at the moment if they want to win the title, and they haven't had to go through that yet. All right, next question, pivoting to baseball. A question from @SweetCincy, interested in thoughts concerning Shota Imanaga's Cy Young versus NL Roy. Ideal scenario for me is Shoto Cy and Skeens Roy, long size Skeens and small Shoto.
Oh, I feel like I need to cede some for you.
Imanaga, by the way.
Yes, I'm in general blown away with how good Imanaga's been. This run doesn't feel especially fraudulent, and I think ultimately, if you can do this in this time of year in that area, then you should be able to carry this for most of the season. And he's banked enough of an edge over the other NL contenders that I don't really see any reason to go hard against him. But it is an interesting kind of food for thought of, is he going to potentially win both, or if he wins the Cy Young, is the door open for someone else to win the Rookie of the Year? And I love that kind of concept. Right now, none of the other National League pitchers are standing out at all in terms of being able to sustain this type of run and be there at the end of the year at the top of the the war for pitchers. So what are your thoughts in terms of what you're seeing from the NL arms so far in 2024?
Yeah, I think with Shota, initially I was a little bit skeptical because I thought you kind of have to regress a little bit to the fact that, this guy's 30 years old. He has a decent track record in Japan that everyone knows about. And the whole league looked at that and decided you're worth 4 years, $53 million. So it's like regressing a little bit to the fact that the league seemingly didn't rate what he did before he came to Major League Baseball. But now, I mean, he's banked 53 innings of, well, there's the .84 ERA, which I don't think is that indicative going forward, but he's banked 53 innings of that. So he doesn't have to have a sub-3 ERA the rest of the way even to win from this point, because he's banked so much of that good stuff. But he's got like a 2.22 FIP, 3.14 xFIP, xERA 2.62. Like, it just seems like he is a legitimate ace. And even if you say that he's like a 3 ERA guy going forward, well, that means that his ERA is going to end up in like the low to mid twos and that was like, basically there was only one Cy Young candidate in the NL last year that ended in that range. I think with Skeens, the interesting thing there is that I think if it is close between those two, tiebreak goes to the quote-unquote actual rookie, the guy who hasn't, been a professional for years, who isn't 30 years old. And I think there will be that sentiment. At the same time, Shota has banked a pretty significant lead. And also, like, Yamamoto is still, like, can't pour dirt on him yet. He still looms in this one. But I think I can't back Shota at minus money. And we'll talk about this with the next question as well. But I think that just this early in the season, when we're 25, 27% through the season or whatever, there's still a lot that can happen. This time last year, Blake Snell had like a 5.5 ERA and was just nowhere in sight. And then he ends up going scorched earth and finishing with a mid to low twos ERA. So a lot can still happen. But I think Shota is the rightful favorite. They have Yamamoto and Skeens kind of tied behind him. And then outside of that, Jones is still looming a little bit, but certainly this seems to be a pitcher's award this season.
Yeah. I got to add one thing. Shota in his division, those are some weak bats, man.
Yes.
And with the imbalance now in terms of how often you're playing your division, he's going to have a lot more opportunities to show up.
Yes. To Shota up. Yes. I think the NL Central is such a rot, and it screwed me a couple of years ago. Paul Goldschmidt, who wasn't that good, and with NL MVP, I had every other person in the market except for him. It's just about my biggest ever loss on that, because Goldschmidt, it's like, all right, well, he's not that good, but it turns out you can be pretty good if you're facing the Pirates over and over again, facing like a bad Cubs team at that point and just lighting them up. So that certainly does help Shota's case. Helps Skeens as well, pitching in the same division. But anyway, we'll see. Shota is definitely the rightful favorite, but I would still have him odds against. Another Cy Young question from @the_Mel_insiders. Have you made any Cy Young bets yet? Lugo 30-1 and Hoke, is that how I say it? Tanner Hoke at 25-1 are tempting me. Anything for you in either of the Cy Young markets yet, Drew?
Yeah, I'm just aching to get down against the top of the market right now, because I just don't think what you've seen is there's been way too much turnover in terms of who is even viewed as a good pitcher at this point, considering all the injuries and just in general inability to perform consistently as a pitcher in today's baseball. It's shocking to me that players like Skubal and Wheeler, who have been fine, are considered at the top of these markets. It just does not look to me like that's sustainable whatsoever. So I'm into finding the prices like the Snells of this year. I know we talked about Shota, but I honestly, like, the AL looks even more wide open to me, and I would love to get a couple of big bombs down on the card, because I think there's going to be some surprises, and this award's probably going to be one in the months of July and August. It's not done whatsoever, particularly in the AL, in my opinion.
Yep. No, I think they're both relatively wide open, even if you think that Skubal and Wheeler should be the current leaders, which I think is fair enough. But the thing with this market is, like, these markets are about attrition, like, more than anything else. And there's still a lot of attrition that can happen between now and the end of the season. The way that I look at these markets and think about them kind of conceptually as I'm pricing them out, when I'm looking forward, I'm using Fangraphs WAR, which looks at your underlying stats. Fangraphs WAR is driven by FIP, not ERA. And then when I'm looking at predicting who will be the final the winner, ultimately what is more important is Baseball Reference WAR, because that is driven by ERA, and ERA is still more important than FIP in determining an actual winner, and that has been proven out time and time again. But at this point of the season, FIP is more predictive of what you're going to do, and also like XFIP and XERA, and underlying like swinging strike rate, whiff rate, all this kind of stuff. And so at the moment, there's no one who is super appetizing to me. The one thing I will say that I think is the most interesting across these two markets is that Chris Sale has had a penalty on his price all season long because of his injury history. And if he didn't have those injuries, he would be like neck and neck with Wheeler right now, I think. But because he has the injuries, which, you can't throw them out. Like, if you have to if you have to bet your life on who's going to make it to the end of the season, Zach Wheeler or Chris Sale, every single person would choose Zach Wheeler. At the same time with Sale, though, like one, he's been completely out of his mind and he just looks like old Chris Sale. And then two, like some of these injuries are problematic. Like he had shoulder inflammation. He's had serious injuries in the past, but these recent injuries have been like he fell off a motorbike. He got hit by a liner and broke a finger. Like I don't care about those things at all. I'm assuming the motorbike is in the shed now, and anyone can get hit by a pitch. So I think Sale, I think he should be very close on merit with Wheeler. Shota is in the mix as well. And look, I don't think he is probably going to deserve it at the end because I think his case will be driven by ERA, but we don't care about deserve it. Like it's going to be who we just want to bet on who wins. And Shota has banked 53 innings of that .84 ERA. And so he would be the favorite to finish with the lowest ERA. And that is the most important thing. So I think that he warrants his place on the current odds board. But I would say that right now I would have a tier 1 in the NL of Wheeler, Shota, Glasnow, and Sale. And Sale is not in that. He's not reflected in that. If you can find anything north of 12-1 on Chris Sale, I think that is a bet. Outside of that, though, nothing super appealing across either of these markets, really. The AL is pretty wide open. I think Scooble is probably more imposing in the AL than anyone is in the NL, but like I can't back Tarek Scooble at plus 175.
No way.
5% of the way through the season.
No. It's not even Gene. And honestly, I can't tell you who is going to win that one, but I'll be absolutely floored if it's Scooble. Interesting commentary on Sale. I hadn't really thought that one through very fully, but you know who's a bigger injury risk than Sale and is shorter in price? Glasnow. Who I'd like your opinion on because and I'm trying not to look too much into history, but it is awfully hard to hit the ball out of the ballpark in San Diego in the later months of the summer. You got any interest in C-set price?
Not really. I mean, he got lit up by the time you're listening to this be a couple of days ago. He got lit up by Atlanta. His underlying stuff really fell off a cliff last year. It's bounced back this season. And look, I said that the other Wheeler, Shota, Glasnow, and Sale are my top 4. Cease would be the clear number 5, and he'd probably just be tier 2 by himself. I don't buy Ranger Suarez. These other guys, Gallen, Peralta, Yamamoto, Nola, they all have their own flaws. But Cease could absolutely get in the mix. I think this award really is about, it's about ERA, it's about WAR, it's about innings pitched, so that is becoming less and less. And then the one other thing which helps Cease and helps Glasnow and helps Sale is it's about strikeouts, and that's where Shota will suffer a little bit because he doesn't strike out guys as much as these other. He doesn't strike out guys as much as these other candidates, though he does have a ton of story, and he's kind of become a phenomenon in himself, which will help counteract some of that. But I think with voters, and this kind of bore out a little bit towards the end of last season, where I think people, they want their Cy Young to have an aura of dominance.
Yeah.
And being like Justin Steele, where you're rock solid and you have the numbers, that sometimes gets minimized if you're being compared to like Spencer Strider, who everyone just thinks is better than Justin Steele. And look, sometimes you can't overcome your numbers. Strider couldn't overcome his ERA. In the end, that sunk him. Steele may well have won if he didn't kind of get blown up in a couple of starts at the end. But like strikeout, just raw strikeout rate, I think is key, even though it's not as important as ERA and some of the other elements. But yeah, that certainly helps Cease, and he's very much in the mix. And if the books has overreacted and pushed him out to 20-1, then I would bet that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good, fair commentary.
All right. Before we get to barbecue, get ready for the greatest spectacle in racing this Sunday. The world's fastest drivers go head-to-head for a chance to claim their place in racing history. It's the Indianapolis 500 beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right. Question from our good friend Kurt Heelan at Basketball Talk. Memorial Day barbecue, dry rub on your ribs or heavy on the sauce? 2 notes here. One, we won't be recording a show on Memorial Day, so there's no Tuesday morning episode next week. Second, I'm vegetarian these days, so not as much of an authority here unless we're rubbing sauce on a portobello mushroom or a Beyond burger or something. But I'll defer to you here, Drew.
Well, you can count on Memorial Day being heavy on the sauce for me. Not barbecue sauce necessarily, but just the liquid courage. Anyway, I honestly the answer is why not both? If you're going to go to the trouble of doing ribs, I highly recommend doing a dry rub and then doing a second rack that is done with an overnight rub and then finished with the sauce. There's you're having people over, you're doing it once a year where you're making a bunch of ribs, you might as well produce a little bit of variety. The only key thing for me with ribs is baby back over St. Louis times 1,000,000. Like that's a kind of a non-negotiable if I'm the one hosting. That said, there's kind of no wrong way to be a good host when you're producing that for your folks at the Memorial Day barbecue. And if you're into the vegan options, which my wife has been a vegetarian since she was 10 years old, we always try very hard to come up with innovative new barbecue options for the vegetarians. And the fake meat world these days has some incredibly cool stuff, honestly. And I think making sure you are providing something for the folks who are meat agnostic is key.
Yep. No, someone comparing the fake meat world to the Dallas Mavericks defense. There is a lot of Daniel Gafford's rim protection about beyond meat these days. No, very good, Drew. Good to know that I'll have a plethora of options should I join you for a holiday in Long Beach at some point. All right, very good question, Kurt. Thanks for that one, mate. Next question from James H. at Jimbo Slice with a 1 instead of an I. You mentioned Ostapenko and Collins for their quarters once draw is confirmed. Could you explain who/what might come up in the draw that would change your opinion?
I love these kind of questions. Could talk about French Open all program, man. So Collins has a problem right now, and that problem is Aryna Sabalenka. She has solved basically everyone else on tour over the balance of the last 2 years, and she is playing the third best tennis outside of Sabalenka and Iga right now. And I think ultimately, if Sabalenka is your top your top seed in Q4, which she will be, and Collins gets drawn into Q4, then all of a sudden that's like big old bucket of ice cold water on my Collins quarter hopes. And price is everything, and it'll reflect that. But that feels like a Collins quarterfinal loss to me, just based on the head-to-heads we've gotten so far in this last couple months. Less afraid of taking on Collins if she's in Iga's quarter, but obviously I think Iga wins this tournament without losing a set, so that would throw a little cold water on it as well. Although I'd love to see top form Danielle Collins and Iga go head-to-head at some point in this tournament, and if it happens to be before the quarter, that'll be fun. Ostapenko, less concerned about where she lands in the draw. I think the price that you're going to get for her quarter, if she lands in Iga's quarter, specifically Q1, is not going to be enough to warrant taking her quarter price. You're going to want to just wait for that match to actually happen if it does, and then back Ostapenko in that match, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of more of the philosophy where, if you have eyes for a given runner, it doesn't even have to be either of the two we've talked about. It could be somebody that you happen to watch at a random match and you're like, whoa, they're putting it together, they're figuring this out and they get drawn into Q2 or Q3 of this particular tournament. Then I think you should be looking for a price there. And I think if a player you have eyes for gets drawn into Q1 or Q2, you wait for them to run into the monster at the end of the boogeyman, and at that time decide if you've seen enough in terms of form from them to warrant backing them in that match, because the difference in price from Ostapenko winning Q1 versus what you're just going to get in a head-to-head match against Iga is not a lot. And so I think you can avoid some of the a mercurial round 2 loss to a qualifier, which Ostapenko is very capable of doing.
Is there some of these longer prices for the French Open, like some of these bigger names that are of any interest to you, like Bencic or Kudermetova is not going to win the French Open, but is there anyone who has the scope to really surprise further down the board?
I don't think Bench is just playing. I think she's like super duper pregnant. But I have to double check on that one. The only kind of super duper long price that would have interest to me would be someone like Daria Kasatkina, because of her game being so perfectly hand in glove with these slow conditions. Daria Kasatkina could literally go up against anyone in this draw outside of the top two and break them on serve every single service game, and you wouldn't shock you. And she would just need to hold one or two times to come away with a pretty big upset. So she would be the name, like a name that people would recognize way down the board, that I think at 50-1 would be of interest. But again, realistically, I'm more interested in quarter prices for a lot of these. And honestly, the overall futures market outside of the top two doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
That's fair. Yeah, it looks like Belinda Bencic is extremely pregnant. I think I'm still super tied to our failed bet on her to win Wimbledon last year.
She came very close
to conjure up a victory for her, but it's going to be hard for her if she's not playing in the tournament. All right, last question. I'll get your thoughts first, and then I'll share my own. Question from at New York Morty. I will be boots on the ground at Roland Garros for opening day, Sunday. Any recommendations at the grounds and or for Paris? First timer heading to Roland Garros and Paris will be my third of 4 Grand Slams. Australian Open will be my final bucket list event to complete the slams.
Well, the first thing I can tell you is congratulations. You've already done something tremendous, which is going on the first Sunday. Anytime you can be there on a day where there are matches going on every court is the optimal way to experience tennis event, in my experience. And I've never been to Roland Garros specifically, but the outside courts are all outstanding. You can avoid the crowds, and you can see literally top players in the world play in an environment that that feels unbelievably, kind of, what's the right word? Like intimate, right? You can stand and watch them as they're changing over and be like, right there and listening to them talk strategy with their coaches. It's very cool to be on the outside course and get that up close and personal to the world's best players. And particularly from people who I've seen and talked to who have been to Roland Garros recently, they have recently redone the court Simone Manuel, which is, kind of a little bit away from the rest of the courts, which makes it a little bit less trafficked, but has again a very, very cool atmosphere. And I would look at the order of play, see if there are any I would especially love to see like a French player on younger, lesser known, and just see the French crowd kind of support that player on Manuel, and that would be a really cool experience. So that would be my tip. But what say you about Paris, Jay?
Paris is one of my favorite cities, Drew. I lived there for a few months. I had a girlfriend who was studying there. And so I was over there for a while. I would say, and it's a little bit late in the piece, but Paris to me is maybe the most literary city in the world, where if you do, and for me, two of my favorite books ever are A Movable Feast by Hemingway, and then Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell. And just reading those gives you a real kind of feel for what the city was kind of 100 years ago or so. And I think that kind of just increases the experience of walking around the streets of Paris. If you've got that kind of background, I will say in the more real life world and outside of Ernest Hemingway's mind, to me, the center of Paris and one of my favorite places on earth is around Saint-Michel, which is, you could start and do a walk from Notre Dame, walk by Shakespeare and Co., which is where the Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy film Before Sunset was set. You walk along the Seine, you bang a left down Boulevard Saint-Michel, you walk along there. There's a lot of little kind of alleyways and cool bars and stuff, and then could walk to Garden de Luxembourg, go by the Sorbonne, the Pantheon. It really is magnificent. It's the type of city where you walk around and you feel like there is something historic on every street corner. It's a magnificent city, very romantic city, one of my favorite places. If you want as well, Saint-Michel is a bit more, not ritzy, but a bit more richer and expensive. If you want the real kind of grungy heart of Paris, that would be Montmartre, which is in the north. That's where Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald and the lads were hanging out in the early 1920s. not the Notre Dame type of vibe up there, but still a very cool artistic area. So that is definitely one to check out as well. There's lots of cool little pockets like Le Marais, the Jewish Quarter is lovely. The area around the Grand Rex Cinema as well. Like there are endless things to do in Paris, and it's just a great city to walk around too. My one piece of logistical advice: if you're changing metros in Paris, try not to change it at the station Châtelet. It is a giant cluster. There's about 50 different metro lines which run through that one. And if you're changing lines, you may think you're just going to the other end of the station. You may be walking for 25 minutes in the underground halls of Châtelet. So try and give that one a miss if you can. All right. Very good. All right.
Great
Grand
tips.
Slam. Yeah. Grand Slam tennis returns to Peacock next week when the biggest stars face off on the clay courts of Roland Garros. Don't miss the French Open, May 27th through June 9th. All right, before we get out of here, French Open men's outrights. Carlos Alcaraz is playing the tournament, unlike Linda Bencic. He is plus 200. Novak Djokovic, 3-1. Jannik Sinner's out?
No, he's gonna go.
He's gonna go.
Yesterday, it sounded like for sure he was about to pull the ripcord, but he made the trip. He's playing against doctor's advice. Jay.
Oh dear, that doesn't tend to end well. Hopefully, there's no OG Anunoby Game 7 type of operation for young Jannik. But he is the third favorite for better or worse at plus 400. Sasha Zverev is 6-1. Tsitsipas plus 750. Nadal 9-1. Casper Ruud 10-1. Doesn't seem super appealing. And then Holger Rune is 14-1. What is your breakdown of this tournament?
This is going to be a fun one. A lot of the uncertainty about player availability and playing has been answered affirmatively. We are going to see the stars. The question is, at what level will they perform? My interest in Alcaraz at 2-1, considering he is dealing with a dominant arm elbow injury, is virtually zero. I think the best you've seen of Alcaraz this entire year was at Indian Wells, and even that was a little bit of a flash. And you can tell me, well, he took a bunch of time off before Indian Wells, and he showed up and he played that well. Like, he could just, show up and be the best player. Sure. I think with the best of 5 format and with the potential for running into very informed players at, various stages in week 2, that is about where I would expect that Alcaraz's French Open ends. For Djokovic, anything could happen. He could show up and get bounced early by just somebody taking him on and him not having the answers. Right now, Djokovic has turned over almost his entire team, trainers, coaches, you name it, nutritionists. Like, literally everyone has been shown the door, and it is very unclear to me if he is pointing at trying to win this slam, like, sincerely, or if he's using it as an opportunity to get matches under his belt before Wimbledon. But a lot, Djokovic could and should still be considered in the mix to win, obviously, but again, at price, not interested. Sinner is the easiest pass at price because, again, as we just said, he's playing against doctor's advice. He's dealing with a hip injury, which, okay, great. If you win 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, and then you have a 5-set, 5-hour monster match, like, that's it. Your tournament's over. You're not coming out for, your quarterfinal match. You're probably a withdrawal. That is exactly what we saw from him last time out. And I think expecting him to be able to go for 2 weeks and 7 matches in this format on these conditions with a hip injury is lunacy. I'm not exactly sure why he's putting himself through this, but at full strength and at full health, I would have Sinner being the obvious choice at these prices because I hold them up in extremely high regard overall, rating wise. And I don't think you should have much of a delta between Alcaraz, Djokovic, and Sinner if all 3 were healthy. Now, that said, Nadal is the easiest pass of all at 9-1. He is kind of coming for his sort of, his goodbye, his hat tip, his, respect to the French crowd, from what I can tell. His quality of tennis that he's produced is so far, far down from what we've seen from him when he was contending for titles here. And, a surprise throwback, performance here or there could happen. But again, best of 5 format and over 7 matches just doesn't seem likely, especially when he's going to have a particularly tough draw. I think the first time that he comes up against a true blue talented player in this draw, he could eke out a win, but then that would probably be the end of it for him. So the top 4 are all bet against for me, even with the knowledge we have, which opens the door for the next 4: Zverev, Tsitsipas, Ruud, and Rune. Now, Rune has been underwhelming so far on this clay cycle, so I don't mind kind of leaving him, out of the mix. And then between Tsitsipas, Zverev, and Ruud, best price is going to be Ruud. That's going to be the horse I end up ultimately attaching my wagon to. I think he is going to be a 7 seed at this tournament, which means he's only going to have to go through one of the top guys, if that. And I think the right draw, he could be positioned quite well just to make a clean run to the semifinals here. In the run-up to the French Open, we have had 4 different winners of the 4 big tournaments. The first was Monte Carlo, where Tsitsipas was the victor. Then in Barcelona, it was Ruud. Then at Madrid, it was Andrei Rublev, surprisingly, who I think has a relatively low chance of making it to the semifinals here. And then lastly, at Rome, it was Zverev. Now, of those, I thought the most impressive was Ruud. And I think in general, he has shown enough quality so far in the year 2024 to believe that he can put it together at Roland Garros and make it to a final and maybe even win this one if he can get a little injury luck on the other side of the bracket. So for me, it's Norwegian Casper Ruud at price riding to the window.
Okay, interesting. The reason I was dismissive of Ruud is just that it's jarring to see his price at 10-1 when you have all of the big guns in the tournament, but I haven't been following as closely. So Alcaraz, Djokovic, Sinner, and Nadal obviously all have their shortcomings at the moment, as you mentioned. With Ruud, do you think that just backing him on average, money line by money line, rolling over, do you think that is going to get you to a bigger price than 10-1?
Entirely draw dependent, but let's come back to this exact question on Thursday, because that is very much on the top of my mind. I have staked Ruud at a bigger price than 9-1. And I would not add to 9-1 until I know whether he's going to be the beneficiary of a soft quarter or whether he's going to have to do it himself. My general sense is that the men's side could end up just being like a wow, what, huh, who? Like that, there's very, very possible that week 2 here has a number of names who you are just entirely unfamiliar with or are surprised to see or asking how did they get here. And in that case, a Ruud 9-1 might be, the way to benefit on what could be ultimately a very chaotic draw.
Okay. Well, considering that, and given that you like Casper Ruud to win the French Open, which implies, to your point, a level of wide openness, is there any scope for guys like a Taylor Fritz or Rublev to actually win the tournament?
Win their quarters? Absolutely. Win the tournament? Probably not. I think Rublev is an interesting case because he seems to have a mental impediment when it comes to winning a quarterfinal at a slam. If you don't believe me, just go look up results, slam level quarterfinals for Rublev, and it is not pretty. And I think, he's going to have to go through somebody tough at that stage at this tournament, unless there is just total chaos in his draw. And so I think he's going to be a pass, even though it's a decent price. Similarly with Taylor Fritz, he actually proved that he couldn't even necessarily get better than past the tier 2 guys. Right. So the Tsitsipas's and the Zverevs of the world kind of picking on him right now. So he'll be around in week 2, as far as I can tell you. And he's playing some good tennis right now, but I don't think it's going to be good enough to beat the tier 2.
Okay. There you go. Casper Ruud, the pride of Norway, as you mentioned. Casper Ruud's been good to me over the journey. So we'll see what his draw does, and then I might get involved. Anyway, we are done for now. Hopefully, when everyone wakes up, it will be to a resounding Boston Celtics victory. And if that is the case, you'll see Drew tomorrow. I'll be up and then back shortly. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com in the meantime for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. I think I actually am doing the show tomorrow on second thought. So, and I may not be if the Celtics lose though. So I'll bucket myself with Drew there too. In any case, we'll see you soon.